Welcome into college football overtime. My name is Garrett Chapman. His name is Abe Gordon. We have a lot of college football that we got to talk about because the regular season has officially come to a close. A lot of people like to say it ends on conference championship weekend. I tend to like to say it closes after Army and Navy finish up. So, of course, we have a wild finish in Army Navy 17-11. The Army Black Knights get the win there. But, Abe, before we get into that, and then Heisman Trophy and transfer portal news, which we have some news that we want to share with you here, right here on College Football Overtime. I got to ask how my co-host is doing. How you doing, Abe?
Yeah, we're doing well, brother. I mean, it feels like we're supposed to have kind of a couple of weeks of slower stuff before we ramp back up into bowl season and certainly into the semifinals and playoffs and all that stuff. But that certainly is not what's happening based on what we saw on the field there at Foxborough there on Saturday and Saturday night into the Heisman. Some interesting results there, and certainly throughout the weekend, some names coming and going in the portal as always. So it is not slowing down very much, that's for sure.
Not much of a slowdown at all, and we're going to get into a lot of the bowl conversation here over the next couple of weeks. Of course, we'll do it as they come. We'll have the ramp up period between now and, of course, Christmas. Manny Diaz, of course, takes a job over at Duke, so we'll have that and a lot of the other coaching carousel discussion coming up here very soon. But before we do any of the Army Navy stuff or any of that stuff, I got to talk about Jayden Daniels, the 2023 Heisman Trophy winner. I don't think there was much of a chance that he was going to get upset for this. And yes, I'd say it's really an upset. He was the betting favorite coming into this. Jayden Daniels, of course, gets 503 first place votes. Michael Penix, the second place vote getter. I would say it wasn't as much of a runaway as I think some people thought it was going to be. I know we talked about it on College Football Overtime. He only wins, of course, by 300 votes. Michael Penix picks up 292 first place votes, but a whopping 341 second place votes. The regional bias was on full display, I will say, or at least not quite to the level of some people might say. But Michael Penix did win the far West Coast. But Jayden Daniels, of course, won everywhere else. So the clear statistical winner when it comes to play on the field, as far as one person being super valuable. I mean, we have one guy who accounted for 600 yards of total offense by himself in a single game. You talk about a team doing that. That's a very impressive performance, much less one person. Jayden Daniels was that guy. He, of course, is a very fitting Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how the voting did break out. It was look, there is not a comparison in terms of statistically and the numbers. I think what you're looking is people saw losses on Jayden Daniels' record. They saw none for Michael Penix, and that's why you get as many first place votes and obviously the bulk of those second place votes as well, which actually did surprise me. I talked about it because going into the Pac-12 title game, it was Bo Nix who was in position to finish second, if not actually win the darn thing. Obviously, he didn't have a great game, and you see the results as they played themselves out. Also very interested to see the amount of players that got first place votes. I don't know if that and look, I don't always look closely going back through the years, but I mean, you got Blake Corum got a couple, not surprising. Jordan Travis got some, but Cody Schrader got one or two. JJ McCarthy in that discussion. But no Carson Beck for any of those first place votes, which, I did take note of. Even Jalen Milroe got one as well. So very long list of guys who received consideration. But ultimately, unlike the College Football Playoff Committee here, Cheap Shot, the Heisman voters did get the right guy. And I think that's what's most important is whether it was closer than you thought or it was a blowout, whatever. This was the guy that had the best overall season in college football this year. He is a deserving winner of the Heisman Trophy. It's not something that I saw coming before the season. I think the guys that were in New York alongside him made sense, right? I mean, those guys, you could have told me before the season, Marvin Harrison goes nuts, he's winning the Heisman. Bo Nix goes nuts, they're undefeated, he's winning the Heisman. Same thing for Penix with the numbers. Did not see Jayden Daniels coming in that manner. And really, it was an interesting season for him, Garrett, because you didn't really get that push starting until like weeks 3 or 4. Sure. You had guys like Penix and Bo Nix were both over 400 yards, I think, in week 1 with 4 or 5 touchdowns, whatever the numbers were. Jayden Daniels didn't really start as hot as you would see most of these guys, but the consistent manner throughout once they entered conference play, you could not deny what he did this season. He is the rightful winner, and congratulations to him and his family for an incredible night, but an incredible season as well.
Yeah, and you did bring up a very interesting point. I'm actually looking at the list. Of course, that's sent over by Deloitte. They do the tabulations for the Heisman Trust. JJ McCarthy picking up a vote feels a little weird that he picks up a first place vote. I don't really know who was watching college football this season and put JJ McCarthy as their number one Heisman winner. Blake Corum, I get a little bit he had 3 first place votes there. That one makes a little bit more sense. Cody Schrader, he's there by virtue of 22 third place votes. He got the 1 first place vote that got him up into 8th place. Ollie Gordon, who honestly, if they don't fall off the way that they did down the stretch, I think he would have had a lot more support. Because you see guys like Jalen Milroe, who's in 6th place, make a big jump at the end of the season. It was basically just his play against Auburn and, of course, his overall play against the University of Georgia in the SEC championship game. And then Florida State likes to stay in 5th. That's Jordan Travis, but undue shot there at Florida State. But he finishes with 8 first place votes, 19 second place votes, 23 third place votes. But it was pretty clear. It's a pretty clear cut. 352 total points for Marvin Harrison Jr., but he is a far cry from 885, 1701, and of course 2,000 overall points for Jayden Daniels. He becomes the 3rd Heisman Trophy winner in LSU history. Very well deserving. I think by the end of it, I think you said no one really expected him necessarily to be the guy at the beginning of the season, much less end of September. But really, it was the play that he had consistently time over time where he was the guy. And I think a lot of people pointed to losses. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at the actual games that they lost, he was averaging something in the range of 450 yards of offense in those games. It's the defense that was allowing 47 points per game on average in those 3 losses. And I think it's really, really difficult to hold that against the starting quarterback because the defense was, not doing anything. They were a sieve, like they were allowing everything past them. They were Swiss cheese. It was brutal. And Jayden Daniels did everything he could in those games to keep LSU and that offense and that overall team in the game. So big credit to Jayden Daniels. Great job from him. Were there any other surprises for you at all? I thought it kind of happened the way I expected to.
I was a little surprised at the results between Penix and Nix, only because they're clearly putting so much, and we're obviously basing it on kind of where Vegas had these guys and what the supposed order of finish was. But it was pretty clear that Bo Nix was going to finish second before the Pac-12 title game. I'm surprised that the performance from both Penix and Nix comparatively in that game switched it so much to where he was such a distant third. I really was kind of interested in who was going to finish second. I could have gone either way. I have no problem with how it did end up going in terms of Penix, but it feels like that one game cost so much in regards to that. I was a little surprised, but other than that, I mean, it was very clear to me that Penix was not going to be winning the Heisman even after winning the Pac-12 title game.
Yeah, and it's good for him. I thought that Michael Penix I thought he was going to have a pretty good argument, I guess you could say, over Jayden Daniels, just based off of winning. Because look, at the end of the day, if you're on the team that wins the most games, oftentimes it's going to be enough to get you there. And I don't think if he had lost another game, then I think that would have been enough to put the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. But really, we didn't get that. So kudos to Jayden Daniels. Good for him. Just a credit to just such a great season that he's had over there in Baton Rouge. We'll see what happens next. Of course, he's moving on to the NFL. All 4 of these guys are likely moving on to the NFL. We'll see with Marvin Harrison. I know we've had we've heard rumblings of offers that have floated his way that he could be coming back to play college football. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but The other three guys we know are going to be moving on to the NFL, which is normally not. We don't have anybody coming back from the actual representation over there in New York, which I think is maybe just going off the top of my head. I can't remember the last time that's happened. But moving on, of course, we have the Army-Navy game. The Black Knights of Army. I think I called them the Golden Knights the other day, and I feel kind of bad about that. But the Army Black Knights take down the Navy Midshipmen at 17-11. Of course, we finished the game with a very impressive goal line stand. Just felt, becoming of this game that you then on the next play after the goal line stand have a safety, and that gets us to the over under of 28 points and just push. It just felt altogether fitting for this game. Of course, it's notorious for hitting the under. Low scoring affair, but that doesn't make it any less great of a football game.
Yeah, very interested in how this one played out. We had the reports pregame that Navy was expected to use two quarterbacks, but they kind of stuck with one, and they threw the ball a lot more than I thought they would. Navy as a team threw the ball 29 times, 179 yards and a touchdown in there. The run game was not great for either team. Army, had the edge there at 205 to a buck 30. The first 59 minutes, like they came and went, and then you get into that situation at the end. And kind of like, obviously a different result, but kind of like you had with Ohio State and Notre Dame early in the season. And it comes down to one final play at the goal line. If you score, you win the game. If you're held out, then you lose the game. And it's just a fitting end. It's an incredible end to the regular season, a great cap for college football for that game. I don't have a lot of memories of Army Navy in like memorable games, right? Yeah. Or finishes or specific plays. But this one is one you might years from now kind of be shown, be remembered. Like this is one they'll show every time they have a broadcast from the Army Navy game, is the goal line stand and all that stuff. So just a thrilling finish, honestly. And for two teams who are not overly familiar with the players, you're not overly familiar, with what they like to, what they try and do in general. But to play a game that puts you on the edge of your seat in the final minute like that and really delivers, you can appreciate that for sure.
It is also very interesting that we have our first touchdown pass for Army against Navy since 2015, by the way, which is just an unbelievable number because if I told you that, you would say that, well, that means Army's not winning a lot of games, but actually they lead the series going back to 2015, I believe. So very impressive for them there. Of course, they win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, and that goes to the team with the best record in head-to-head matchups against other service academies, and that's because Army upset then number 17 Air Force 23-3, I believe, last month. But hey, good for them. Of course, we see just a great football game, a very, good game, great game that comes down to the finish. Two teams that run the triple option, or Army kind of like a speed option of sorts, not necessarily a gun option of sorts. Not really your classic wishbone, but still, it is the 124th meeting between these two teams, and Navy still has the edge over them. I think it's 62-54 now, I want to say. But of course, Army takes down Navy 17-11. Another great game between these two great teams. But I do want to move into a little bit more of our discussion here with the transfer portal, because of course you see a lot of these big teams that have something to gain. And that's what a lot of people talk about. We talk about Dylan Gabriel. We'll talk about his decision to commit later on in college football overtime. But we talk specifically about the teams that pick up the big player. And I know that you might want to talk about that right here, but I want to talk about the teams with the most to lose. So far, I have two teams who have been the biggest losers so far. Well, three, if you want to include Vanderbilt. They lost quarterbacks galore, and they've lost their top receiver, their top running back. They've lost a lot of people. But two people specifically that I want to point to real quick. The first of which, Oregon State. Those poor guys. Jonathan Smith, the head coach. Of course, he moves on. He goes to Michigan State. Aiden Childs, he follows him to Michigan State. But then you lose DJ Uyunglele, Gerard McCoy, who tied for the team lead in interceptions, Ackley Arnold, and then his brother Easton Macraeus Arnold, who led the Pac-12 in tackles this year. Forgive me for that second. The first name of his last name, I can never pronounce it. But they're brothers. Both of them have jumped into the portal now. Oregon State is just in a really bad spot right now. They've just been decimated in the transfer portal, and I think it might only get worse as we go along. Martinez, of course, he was arrested earlier this month. He's staying at Oregon State. But then Texas A&M, of course, we saw that they lost Jimbo Fisher. They fired Jimbo Fisher, I should say. Walter Nolan and LT Overton are both former 5-star defensive linemen from the 2022 class from 24/7. Both of them are in the portal now. That's a huge loss. You lose Max Johnson and his brother Jake Johnson, the tight end. That's another big loss. It's just been a brutal couple of weeks here, or a brutal week, I should say, for both of those teams.
Yeah, I'd like to add in a couple schools alongside that. Look, some of it is because of transfer portal, and some of it is because of other situations you're dealing with, like you mentioned, with you're losing your head coach there, or if for Texas A&M you fire your head coach. But Dylan Gabriel leaving Oklahoma leaves them in some trouble. I don't know what the plan is for the Sooners. I'm not going to tell you I know what their recruiting class is now, but Jackson Arnold is a freshman who spent some time throwing the ball around when Dylan Gabriel was injured at various points of the season. But losing Dylan Gabriel as you're about to head into the SEC, it is a tough draw there, because you're heading into unfamiliar territory conference-wise with question mark at quarterback. And Dylan Gabriel could have served as kind of a calming influence to some extent for Oklahoma, but obviously he's on his way out. And kind of a similar situation with Washington State and Cameron Ward, and we'll find out at some point, I believe in the near future, I would think, where he's headed. But between not having a conference, having to play a largely Mountain West schedule, and then doing so without a guy that looked like he could have really been something important there at Washington State in your quarterback, that's a tough draw as well.
Yeah, it's just very difficult for some of these programs. Vanderbilt just lost their starting quarterback, of course, and there are a lot of great programs. You look at Duke; they just lost Mike Elko, and then Riley Leonard moves, and then Waters moves, and it's one of the most interesting times in our sport right now, for real. College football right now, you had, I think, 20% of rosters last year, over the course of this year, were made up of transfer portal players. You had 500 plus players just at the Division I level put in their decision to transfer just on Monday alone. We're up over 1,000 people. I look down on my phone and I have Jaquavius Marks from Mississippi State, who'd run for 3,000 yards. He just put his name into the transfer portal. At the time of this recording, that's literally happening right now. This is the kind of thing, it's only going to continue getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this pool of players is just going to continue to grow. We're well over 1,000 people whose names are in the portal right now, and a lot of those, like Mekhi Muse. He's a guy who was a former walk-on player who's now going to go get a scholarship somewhere, which honestly, great for him. I'm excited for him. But at the stage that we're in right now, I don't know how sustainable that it is right now as it stands. I like that they have some guidelines in place where you can't just jump into the portal and go find your new team at some random point in the month of February. I like the idea that all of it can happen kind of at once. The reporter in me likes to believe that it's all going to happen at one time and keep it to a schedule, so I don't pull all my hair out. I'm too young to lose all my hair, so I don't want to have to deal with that necessarily, but I'm already doing everything else with recruits and everything else. So I don't want to deal with the transfer portal too. But of course, when it all happens in one big week and over the course of 30 days, I should say, that kind of makes my life a little easier. So I cannot only imagine what it's like for the head coaches of these institutions looking to build their rosters through the transfer portal. But like we talked about, teams with the most to lose also retain as much as they possibly can in that portal. You're constantly recruiting your own players on top of the players that you're recruiting to come join you. So it's a weird time in college football.
Yeah, and they've done it to themselves a little bit. The NIL has affected the transfer portal more than anything else. And how many of these guys are leaving their school because of a situation they're looking to escape versus I can cash in? And so to an extent, they have brought this upon themselves. Obviously, getting rid, I believe they got rid of the transfer one time for free nonsense or whatever. So the fact that people can always go somewhere and play immediately, not be penalized with sitting out a year. And I know you're dealing with the COVID year, so you got extra years, and they got new rules for if your coach gets fired or leaves. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that essentially make it penalty free to transfer. And if you go back to where you were a couple years ago, and it's a much tougher decision, and NIL would still affect it. But for the most part, if you had to get a waiver to be eligible immediately, I think you would see a lot less of this. But unless that is the plan moving forward, you're going to see the transfer portal and NIL hand in hand until, because I do believe the market will reset at some point for both the portal and for NIL money spending. But until that happens, they're hand in hand in business with each other. And you're going to see this every year, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think you are right. I think it's going to correct itself. It's just the inevitability. It's just simple economics, if you will. This is just the way that things happen. I mean, you set something into motion, and then you let the market dictate what it's worth. So I think we'll see maybe some market correction here in the next couple of years. It's just, can college football and college athletics afford to wait for the market to figure itself out here in the next couple of years? I don't know if that's the case. Fortunately, I'm not Charlie Baker, and I'm not the one who has to make that decision. So I know this is it's a bit of a thankless position for him over there at the NCAA, but it's not like the NCAA has necessarily been a beacon of hope when it comes to being a pioneer of change, if you will. But of course, on Saturday, we did get some big news. So I want to jump into some potential transfer portal news and notes here, Abe Gordon, if you're interested in that. I think because Dillon Gabriel, he made the first big splash. We saw Aiden Childs. He follows his head coach, Jonathan Smith, to Michigan State. But the first real splash, of course, is Dillon Gabriel transferring over to the University of Oregon. Bo Nix, the back-to-back seasons, they're going to have 6-year quarterbacks manning the ship over there at the quarterback position. 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns for Gabriel this last season. I thought he was going to go to Mississippi State, truthfully. His offensive coordinator, Levy, he moves on to take that job at Mississippi State down at Starkville. I'm a little surprised he ended up taking the job over at Oregon. So what are your thoughts there? And then the second thought is, do you think that this is going to be kind of a launching pad moment for the quarterbacks?
So I'll start with Gabriel. I think this is a great fit for Oregon. He brings the program what it's probably going to need as it enters the Big Ten, obviously, in terms of that aspect. But to stay where it is on the borderline top 5 team, and obviously we'll see how it plays itself out as the playoffs expand next year. He's perfect for their offense. He's mobile. I think he throws a very good and accurate ball, but maybe isn't the best deep ball thrower that we've ever seen. Bo Nix is very similar. And Oregon asks you to be accurate, asks you to make a lot of intermediate throws. And I think Dillon Gabriel's great for that. And obviously he can use his legs. We certainly saw that in that game, that huge upset against Texas. So I do think it's a good fit. I was surprised as well. I didn't know who Oregon would go after. And obviously connecting the dots to following your head coach makes sense. I did a little bit of that myself. So I don't blame you on that. Could they have gotten someone bigger? Potentially, but I don't know.
Bigger.
Well, I mean, I think Cam Ward is bigger. Riley Leonard maybe could have been looked at as bigger.
He has the do not. So it's important to note he does have the do not contact tag. So right. He wants to approach other people. He does not want to be approached by other programs.
You're referring to Riley Leonard there,
Leonard,
obviously limiting. Really, I'd just call them annoyances because I don't need every school that's got a quarterback need coming after me. So I don't blame him for that. But it really is a good fit. Like, it just makes sense when you pull back and look at it. And so now you question what we're looking at next year. Now, if Dillon Gabriel starts all 12 games, he will break the record that Bo Nix set for most college starts in a career. So there's an opportunity to follow that. He would need all 12 games to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But we just saw Bo Nix on the dais there Saturday night. Is Dillon Gabriel a potential Heisman candidate in that Oklahoma offense? I think legitimately he is. I think you're dealing with numbers and stats. And now the difference is you're going to have to do it in the Big Ten. You're not doing it against the Pac-12 opponents. And how does that impact your play? How does dealing with weather, for that matter, impact your play? Because you're going to be some snow games. There's going to be some cold weather. And certainly he didn't deal with that at UCF. He didn't deal with that for the most part. And look, they have road games, right? If you're at Oklahoma, you go up to Kansas, it might be cold, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not South. It's not Wisconsin.
Yeah,
It's not Madison,
so,
Wisconsin, or
there. It'll be some interesting things to see, but it's a good fit, and I think it's a pretty smart move, savvy move for Dan Lanning to, one, circle on his guy, and then two, move quickly before any other fallout, which leads me to the second part of the question that you asked. Is Dillon Gabriel committing the first domino, and now we see a surge of other announcements? I don't think so. I don't think it's based on him. I don't think it's based on any one quarterback. And I know I've mentioned this to you before. I just think it's about Ohio State first, because they have, in my opinion, they have to get a transfer quarterback. I think it starts there and then moves pretty quickly after that. The other caveat to this, and timelines get tricky because they are in the college football playoffs, but Oregon just found the quarterback that they're going to use in 2024. A lot of people believe that Washington is going to pull in someone from the transfer portal for next season to be their starter.
Yeah.
The question is, do they wait until after the playoffs, or are they able to pull someone in while they're messing with game prep and stuff like that? Because the one thing you don't want to do is sit there and watch Ohio State or Duke or Miami, potentially Florida State, and whatever Auburn, whatever teams you want to say they're probably going to go out and get a quarterback in the portal. You don't want to be the one person still waiting.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I mean, it's recruiting's a 365 deal. Like whether it's prep sports or prep athletes, or if it's transfer portal athletes, they are in the portal right now. They are actively recruiting people and doing everything else.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they will, but
they won't sit by and rest on their laurels. I
would it
guarantee
surprise
that.
you if they announce an incoming quarterback before their game? They may have a deal,
if that's
deal,
the option.
but
like if that's the option, why would they wait? What's the point of waiting? They don't gain anything from waiting.
You do wonder the impact it has on the current players. Not on Penix, but potentially on a backup.
Well, then that's their problem. No, you're not.
You're not doing
that.
But, and
no, I understand.
Part of what
I understand
you have
what
to
you're
weigh.
saying. No, this isn't, because it's not as clear cut. They're going to bring in a quarterback back. I don't think it's necessarily that situation. I understand where you're coming from as far as potentially what happens if Michael Penix gets hurt and then they bring in it. Okay, well then this is your audition. Like, sorry, like this is just the nature of college athletics. This is the nature of athletics, period. It's competition. Like, this is what it is. I mean, I don't know if they go out. I don't know what their quarterback situation is behind Michael Penix, truth be told, offhand. I don't know if they have a guy in-house already that they want to push. I don't know if they're active in the portal right now. I don't directly cover Washington.
Yeah.
So I don't know the ins and outs of their program like that. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer is going to be super, super deep into that. I just don't know off the hand. But I do know that his old quarterback was Michael Penix. He was the offensive coordinator at Indiana. And so that's one of the reasons why Penix followed him over. I don't know if there's another guy like that necessarily who's going to be in that sort of in that sphere. I mean, there are a lot of programs who don't like to go big game hunting in the transfer portal as far as quarterbacks go. Some people like to recruit and develop from within. So I'm not fully convinced, and I know you're full-fledged convinced that Ohio State's going to go add somebody in the transfer portal. I'm not quite as convinced. I'm just not, because Aaron Noland and Devin Brown are both in-house already. Well, Aaron Noland will be there. Of course, he's from Langston Hughes right here in Atlanta. Top dual threat quarterback coming out of this class, 4-star recruit right here at Langston Hughes. He's a beast, and I've seen him firsthand. I know what this kid looks like. He is college ready. Devin Brown is already in house up there. He's a former 4-star recruit. He's ready to go. I don't know if you need somebody. It just felt like Kyle McCord. That's one of the reasons why he couldn't commit to him. And now, if they go out and add Cam Ward, I think that would be very interesting. I think that would be a very good 1-year plan. But not every team wants to do something like that. Most programs, from what I have seen, of course, we're still in the very early stages. What I have seen is people like to develop their quarterback from the inside. Georgia's done it that way. Alabama's done it that way. We've seen a few exceptions to that. Of course, Joe Burrow and Jayden Daniels, that's 2 Heisman Trophy winners that were added from LSU. So, look, there are a lot of different ways that you can do roster construction. We've seen Dabo Swinney, who's just been hell-bent on not using the transfer portal. So I don't know if there's any one way to properly do it one way or the other, but I do know that they lost Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord's on the move. So they have a hole, if you will. I just don't know if they're going to fill it in the portal.
Yeah, look, I only suggest that because I think Ryan Day is on the hot seat and feels the pressure. And
that's a good point.
You got to get that right. You can't work your way through it. Because if you lose to Michigan a 4th straight time, you're probably getting fired. So whether he does go with one of the guys that are on campus now, or an incoming freshman, or someone from the portal, they better get that one right, because and it's only getting tougher, obviously, with Oregon, Washington among the teams that are entering the conference as well. So there's obviously some room for error, right? Because you got 12 teams, and they're not going to. If you lose to Michigan and go into the playoffs and make some noise, maybe, whatever. But you better get that thing corrected this year. And that's why I think that they are big game hunting. Now, the other option is, if they don't get the 1 or 2 guys that they've circled, maybe they do enter with guys that are on their list. In terms of what's the right way to do it, I mean, let's look at the 4 this year, right? Like Michigan developed J.J. McCarthy. He's their recruit. Jalen Milroe at Alabama. Penix obviously was a transfer. And then Quinn Ewers is interesting because technically he is a transfer out of Ohio State. I don't know where you fall on this. I believe Quinn Ewers went to Ohio State always intending to transfer, but he went to get NIL money for 1 year, which he was not able to do at Texas at that time. So I don't know if you feel that way. I feel that was always the plan. So yes, he technically is a transfer, but kind of developed as well. So you're in terms of transfers, you're two are in and 2 are out.
I completely forgot he was at Ohio State for that year.
Yeah,
he opted to forego his senior year of high school to go sit on campus and practice with the team, basically.
Yeah, he got, because of the age situation, I think.
But he wasn't eligible.
Yeah, he couldn't get NIL money at Texas, but he could at Ohio State for whatever reason. So I mean, yes, he technically is a transfer, but I do look at him as a guy that Texas developed, and maybe that, you could also be a transfer and be developed by that team, because the guys that we're talking about are kind of already on that platform and have made plays and are now coming in. Quinn Ewers had not done that. So you look at that a little bit differently. But I still believe, and I don't know if you're the same, I think a line of succession at quarterback and not playing that revolving door, but doing it the way that Kirby Smart seems to be doing it, now look, they also tried, right, the transfer thing at Georgia, right? You had Jamie Newman, you had JT Daniels, and I know technically Stetson, but he was there, then left, and came back, whatever.
He did I almost said proper. He did the traditional route.
He
for a
did the
lot of
old
good
school JUCO
old
and yeah.
JUCO. Yeah.
Um, but Georgia developed Stetson Bennett. I don't think
Yeah.
there's any denying that. They've developed Carson Beck, and they're looking to develop Gunnar Stockton, Dylan Raiola, Puglisi, whoever is going to be on campus and form
Mhm.
that quarterback room. So yeah, I think that's the way to go. Um, but I mean, only time will tell over the course as we get through it.
Yeah, and, look, at the end of the day, I think it's gonna make for a very interesting cycle. I know this year in particular, we have a ton of veteran one-year rental type of
Yeah,
quarterbacks. Will Howard, Riley Leonard, who's at the end of his college career. He's a junior this year. I think he might have 2 years of eligibility still. Kyle McCord, of course, we talked about Ohio State. Kyle McCord moved off. He was just at the University of Nebraska over the weekend. That's one of the favorites to land his services. Will Rogers, DJ Uiagalelei, Tyler Van Dyke. There are a number of one-year rentals that are out there and available. I don't know how many of those guys are necessarily going to get upgrades or are going to be upgrades for the teams that they transfer to, but it does make for a very interesting cycle because we're starting to see a lot more of the linchpin type players move off of their institutions and uh into new places, you know? So it's like we don't know. Some of these people may end up coming back. You don't know. I mean, we really don't know. It's just sort of this period in flux. But Dante Moore is specifically one person who I'm going
right.
to have my eye on as we move through this. Of course, he had a very tumultuous recruitment process, but he goes to UCLA. He ends up having like had a okay year. I mean, he was fine. He was young. He was a freshman player, made freshman mistakes. But his offensive coordinator and head coach, and there's all kinds of turmoil over there at UCLA. So it makes complete sense why he wants to get up out of UCLA and go get a fresh start. But lots of news and notes around all of the transfer portal. I have my eye on specifically the two defensive linemen from Texas A&M as well. So I know we've been talking about quarterbacks specifically, but Etienne, he's a very interesting person to watch. Waters from Duke, he's a very interesting person to watch. But specifically Walter Nolan and LT Overton, the two former five-star defensive linemen. Those two people are going to be very, very important in this next cycle. They're going to go somewhere. I think Walter Nolan is probably a shoe in at Tennessee or at the University of Michigan. Both were very high on his list during his his recruitment cycle back in 2022. I think that makes for a very interesting cycle for them too. But I don't know what the timeline is for a lot of these folks. We saw our first real domino fall with Dylan Gabriel. We haven't seen anything since. So it's been now at the time of this recording, it's been a full 24 hours, coming on 48 hours. Uh, it's been a while. So I don't think that it was necessarily going to be the first domino. Like that was the initial question. But look, it'll make for a very interesting transfer portal cycle.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of guys who you may not realize are going to have a huge impact on the season next year that are not
Yes.
quarterbacks, like you mentioned, and it's going to be very interesting to see. And look, there's some schools who are either in the playoffs or narrowly missed the playoffs that have holes and need to fill holes and are going to use the portal to do so, and recruiting as well. But it's going to be, it's going to be the Wild West for a couple of years here as we get this whole figured out. One thing on Dante Moore that you mentioned, and he's super intriguing because, yes, he is that transfer, but kind of like Quinn Ewers, he's a guy you can kind of develop
Yep.
into what hopefully can lead your program forward in the next year or two. Um, there's a lot of reports and some news coming about him potentially considering Oregon, even though they obviously just got Dylan Gabriel. It would set up an interesting line of succession if you
Yeah.
start Dylan Gabriel. You have Dante Moore learn for a year under him. Now, that requires patience from Moore, and not every quarterback of his talent wants to sit for a year, but then potentially starting for 2 years after that,
Yeah.
which could be very, very interesting if that's how it plays out. I know Dylan Gabriel's already made public comments that he would welcome Moore into the program as well, if that is the choice. So
Mhm.
that's something I find very interesting is using one transfer portal window here this year in 2023 leading into 2024 to potentially, if you're Dan Lanning, set up your quarterback for next year, but also possibly for a couple years after that. I don't recall that being done in that manner, where you get two big quarterbacks with a plan to start one and have one learn and then move forward that way. So wondering to see if that's maybe a trend as some of these guys who still have their COVID year eligibility stuff play out 1 year, and then you get a young guy as well. So interested to see how that plays out, if that is even his final landing spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would also assume that there'd be a quarterback battle between those two, and so it's not completely unheard of that a Dante Moore would go in and beat him out. Crazier things have happened. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all at the end of the day. So I think it makes for a very interesting cycle. I know we'll have lots of news and notes to get into as we continue on through college football overtime. But that's it for us today. Pretty short one today. I feel like we just finished up the regular season. We're moving into a lot of the rumor mill season. I know Major League Baseball likes to call this the hot stove season. We're kind of in the transfer portal season. So that's we're going to start hearing a lot of these rumors and recruitment. Of course, we have the early signing period coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So plenty of stuff to stay on top of here with college football, especially as we get into the bowl season. One of my favorite times of the year. College football teams, of course, playing in their bowl games, many of them breaking bowl list streaks, and we're very excited for that. So make sure you're liking and subscribing down below. Jump in there, give us a 5-star review if you feel so inclined. We really appreciate all that you do. Thank you so much for listening. For Abe Gordon, my name is Garrett Chapman. We are College Football Overtime. We'll catch you again on Thursday morning. Thanks so much for listening. We'll